Hello, my name is Dr. Huda Sharaf. I am a board-certified internal medicine physician, and I serve as the medical director at Pat Walker Health Center at the University of Arkansas. I've been asked today to discuss COVID vaccine safety and efficacy, and I am more than happy to discuss this topic. I actually have received the Pfizer vaccine. I'm very grateful that I have. I received my first dose over 6 weeks ago and completed both doses now, and I'm past the 2-week mark. And so I wish this for everyone else watching this video. What I want to talk about are the two vaccines that are currently on the market. It's Pfizer and Moderna. Johnson & Johnson is actually on the heels of these two companies, and hopefully they will have their vaccine approved for emergency use by the FDA in the coming weeks. Pfizer and Moderna both require 2 doses of vaccine. Pfizer requires 2 doses 21 days apart, and Moderna requires 2 doses 28 days apart. After receiving the second dose, within two weeks after receiving the second dose, is when people are found to reach the most effective immunity against COVID-19. Both trials went through rigorous review, and a lot of work went into the study and thankfully the establishment of a safe vaccine. Both vaccines trials incorporated over 30,000 participants. It's not a small number. I say all of this again to start that conversation of the safety of the vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, once approved by the FDA, will actually be approved for emergency use authorization, just like Pfizer and Moderna. It will be just 1 dose. It does not have quite as high the effective rating as Moderna and Pfizer, who each have about 95% effective percentages. Johnson & Johnson sits at about 72%. But again, please keep in mind, 72% is not a bad number. People who aren't vaccinated have 0%. If we can also achieve less severe symptoms with COVID by vaccination, as well as obviously prevention of symptomatic infection, and prevent people from going to the emergency room or getting hospitalized, that's going to be a huge step in the right direction. So let's talk about a little bit about Pfizer and Moderna, and they're called mRNA vaccines. mRNA stands for messenger RNA, and so I want to spend a little bit of time just talking not really specifics, but in general terms how that works. Messenger RNA, in essence, is a list of instructions, a recipe, or a code. So what ends up happening is if you get Pfizer or Moderna, they will administer the shot in your upper arm, and then the messenger RNA from coronavirus, again, it is just messenger RNA. This is not live virus. It will not give you the infection of COVID-19. The messenger RNA then enters some of the muscle cells, and what it does is it enters the cell, and then portions of the cell recognize the messenger RNA instructions, telling the cell how to make spike proteins. Spike proteins, I'm sure by now ad nauseum, all of us have seen some rendition or cartoon of the coronavirus, which is basically a sphere or a ball covered in spikes. The messenger RNA gives instructions on how the cell can make and mimic those spike proteins. Again, not the live virus. Once the cell gets the instructions for the spike protein and can start making it, it destroys the messenger RNA that's in that vaccine. So the component of the vaccine does not linger. It does not enter the nucleus of the cell. It does not interfere with your DNA, your genetic makeup. All of those are myths. But once the cell starts to produce spike proteins, it likes to show off its work and put it on the surface of its cell. The body then recognizes the spike protein is not supposed to be there, and then creates an army of antibodies. And antibodies are what our body produces to fight off various types of infection. So now your body is producing an army of antibodies that says, ooh, the spike protein's not supposed to be there, so we're going to destroy it and we're going to neutralize that. And so this is how your body responds to the vaccine. By building an army of antibodies that when faced with the real deal, coronavirus, it sees these spike proteins and says, oh no, that's not supposed to be there. So this army of antibodies that your body has produced quickly identifies coronavirus as foreign, attacks it, and neutralizes it, preventing the person that has been vaccinated from getting the disease. It's very important, for folks to actually understand and learn this. Again, it also lends to the safety of the vaccine. I want to reiterate, messenger RNA vaccine does not interfere with the DNA of the person receiving that vaccine. One of the common questions I get is, this was developed so fast? I mean, with other types of vaccines, it's taken years to produce. And so people are scared. They're like, oh, it was rushed through. It wasn't as reviewed as rigorously as other vaccines. That is not true. In typical research terms, research typically happens in more of a relay pattern. You have a group of scientists that do one section of the research, collect the data, and they pass that data along to another group of scientists. Because COVID has affected the globe in lots of negative ways, regarding our health, regarding deaths, also having a huge financial impact on the globe and an academic impact added to that. Multiple scientists and multiple groups have been very motivated to find a safe and effective vaccine. So instead of having a relay situation, you have lots of each person in a separate lane doing their own research. Research requires funding. And again, because this has had such a huge global impact, the backing and the financial monies needed have not been an issue. Messenger RNA technology has been around for decades, 20 to 30 years. Prior to the pandemic, there were current trials trying to use messenger RNA for flu vaccine, for Zika, for rabies. But again, research requires funding and it requires money. So those processes were slow because of the lack of that support. The COVID vaccine that has been produced went through all the similar processes, all the rigorous reviews, and the extensive detailed review from the FDA. We're very lucky in the fact that the research was able to be completed and result in effective vaccination. Obviously, I didn't hesitate to get my vaccine, and I hope that you won't either when it is offered to your group. The other question I get a lot is, well, we don't know the long-term effects of the vaccine. Or 99% of people who have COVID survive. I read a statement, heard a statement that I'm borrowing. This is not my own. But that surviving and thriving are very different things. We know that the vaccine, as we've stated, is safe. The messenger RNA technology has been around for decades. We're also beginning to understand what the long-term effects of actually having a COVID-19 infection mean. We've been in this pandemic since hitting the shores of our country for over 1 year now. And there are 3 major organ systems that can suffer from COVID-19 infection. The first is your lungs. If you've had COVID-19, and some folks have developed severe and significant lung infections, some of those folks can be left with scarring in their lungs, which can lead to long-term breathing problems. Just imagine if someone already started out with asthma or had emphysema and ended up with COVID. Their symptoms will likely be heightened and more chronic subsequent to having the infection. Second organ system is your heart and your blood vessels. There are studies currently happening, studying actually people who've had mild symptoms from COVID-19, and then weeks later doing ultrasounds of their heart. They're finding in some of these individuals, again, not all of them, but in some of these individuals that have even those that have had mild symptoms, they're finding that some of them are demonstrating some heart muscle damage. Again, that can lead to significant heart problems moving forward in their future. COVID-19 for some can increase the likelihood of developing blood clots. And these blood clots can go to the brain and they can go to the lung. And again, this is independent of age, young or old. Again, not everyone will suffer from this, but some will. The brain can have long-term effects from COVID-19, involving a clot to the brain, which causes a stroke. COVID-19 can cause seizures. So we know the long-term effects of COVID-19 can be significant. I wouldn't want to take any chances with the infection and would much prefer developing immunity from a vaccine than getting infected with COVID-19. I want to define what herd immunity means. I've heard people tell me, well, I'm not worried about COVID-19. All my surrounding friends and family have all had COVID, and that's herd immunity. That is not herd immunity. Herd immunity occurs when a large percentage of a community develops immunity against an infection. In doing so, transmission of disease decreases, and then this decreases the likelihood of someone getting the infection. I've heard herd immunity defined a few ways. I've heard a minimum of 70% of the population must have immunity against the infection, or 80% of the population must have immunity against the infection. We need to achieve herd immunity through active vaccination. I've had people tell me, well, if I get infected, I get immune. Well, the immunity from infection, first of all, is felt to be pretty short, maybe 90 days, maybe at most 6 months. They're not sure. And the immunity from the vaccine is actually much longer. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the folks that talk about herd immunity through infection, trying to get together and everybody get COVID. Currently, the death rate's about 1.6%. Let's take a look at the United States. The United States' population is 330 million, roughly. 80% of that population is 250 million. 250 million people in our country become infected with COVID-19. We will have 4 million deaths. That is not the way for our country and our communities to achieve herd immunity. If we vaccinate 70 to 80% of our communities, we decrease the death rate, and we also decrease the number of active cases. Currently, the United States, total active COVID cases are roughly 25% of the total active COVID cases in the world. Our fatality rate in the United States from COVID-19 thus far, and our fatality numbers, are roughly 20% of the total COVID-19 deaths in the world. I hear people sometimes, again, still I can't believe people are saying COVID's no different than the flu. I think during one of our worst seasons in influenza in the United States, we had 80,000 deaths. We have had, as of 2 days ago, 475,000 deaths from COVID-19 in this country. We all want the pandemic to end. We all want to get on the other side and again regain some level of normalcy. And in order to do so, we have to get vaccinated. History teaches us a lot. It teaches us our mistakes, but it also teaches us our successes. This is my first pandemic. So we're all learning as we go, and it's been a long year. But it's not the world's first pandemic. We've had measles, polio, smallpox, Spanish flu. All of these pandemics ended successfully because we had effective vaccines. And that is how this pandemic will end. We hear a lot about COVID variants. Mutations can continue and will continue as long as transmission continues. Once we're able to decrease COVID-19 transmission, active cases, and deaths, those mutations will also decrease. I could talk for hours regarding my advocacy for COVID-19 vaccination. And I would hope that once offered to your group, you will get the vaccine. For those vaccines requiring 2 doses, you must return for the 2nd dose. The country is currently now fighting a battle of those who received the first vaccine not returning for their 2nd. You will not reach maximum efficacy from the vaccine until the 2nd dose is received. One of my last points will be, once vaccinated, we will still have to adhere to safety guidelines for a while. Getting vaccinated is not permission for us to lose our masks and start gathering. It's going to take months for us to reach a level of immunity that protects all of us. So even if you get vaccinated, you still need to wear your mask. You need to physically distance, wash your hands, avoid crowds, practice good judgment. All of us, including me, want to get on the other side of this pandemic and resume some normal routine. I think most of us, I think it's fair to say, will likely not take a lot of things for granted ever again. And I honestly can't wait to be able to sit in a room and have a meeting or a discussion with people face to face and not have to record myself and send it out. We'll get there, but please consider what I've stated today, and once the vaccine is offered to your group, please take it. Thank you for your time. Take care.